My name is Todd Durham. I am a super junior at Crossroads Bible College, which means I got until next December before my BS graduate. Tonight, I've actually been put on my heart to speak on Genesis chapter 13. When I open up this message, I use the movie Divergent, which came out 2 years ago. And the definition of divergent means tending to be different or to develop in different directions, which means we have a choice to make. So I hope you join us, and I hope you listen to the message, and I hope God speaks to your heart. Thank you.
So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot went with him into the Negev. So Abram was very rich in livestock, and now he's rich in silver and in gold. And he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar to the Lord at first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. Just in these 4 short verses, there's a ton of things going on here, guys. God showed Abram his great mercy, and he opened up the door so that Abram could return to the promised land unharmed. Abram still had everything that he had, which means he took everything with him to Egypt, including his nephew Lot. He took all Lot, and he took his nephew Lot, which Lot had a lot too. So when Abram went down to Egypt, none of this is mentioned. Our focus is strictly straight on Abram and Sarai. But now that we're on the trip back home, we've got to understand that we can't overlook this, because Abram is still dragging all that extra weight with him in the midst of his faith faltering. He's carrying all that weight. And to top it all off, his possessions pile up in his ill-gotten gain from Pharaoh. So he went out and he got more to carry around with him. So divergent, tending to be different or develop in a different direction. This theme runs throughout the entire Bible, the entire length of the Bible. 2 people, 2 nations, 2 decisions, 2 destinations. Diverging. Cain and Abel. Isaac and Ishmael. Joshua 24:15. Choose whom you will serve, the path you will take. Holy God, sinful man. Divergent. Now, we may never be able to go back and change the choices that we've already made, but our choices have impact. Who's your walk of faith impacting? Our walk of faith is always on display. Always. Now, the whole time that Abram is in Egypt, we never hear about Lot, but he's there. He's there when Abram steps out in faith. He's there when Abram wavers and decides to go to Egypt. He's also there when they return back to the promised land. Lot is witnessing every move that Uncle Abe is making. The reason why this is important to see is because our actions affect other people. And you are going to get hit with it because you're a Christian and you're supposed to act a different way. Now, between chapters 12 and 13, there's another theme that's developed, and I mentioned that earlier. Do not go down into Egypt. This theme kicks off right here. The Old Testament mentions the phrase over 38 times. It is reiterated in the New Testament time and time again. Don't go there. There's significance there, because Egypt represents going into the world. Do not go out into the world and partake in its values. Be ye in the world, but not of it. Abram was already rich. This man was filthy rich. He was loaded. But this gives you the idea that he's one of those erudites. He's very, very, very his mind had capacity. He wasn't very practical, because you can see that when he stepped out of his faith. It is important to see that old nephew Lot is witnessing all this, because what Uncle Abe is doing, he's stepping out of that faith. Walking in faith and talking with God is what Abram did. But he diverged. He made a different choice. The external pressure of where he was caused him to make a decision that everybody witnessed. Are you aware that the walking of your faith actually affects other people? Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together, and there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At this time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in their land. So now we got family watching, and we got the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Perizzites and the Izzites and all the ites watching as well. Lot was rich in his possessions. As we have seen, Uncle Abe's backsliding already. He's not walking with God. Lot is witnessing to this, but this is very important because Abram was rich, but he wasn't as rich as the world. He wasn't as rich as Egypt. Egypt had it going on. He also witnessed Uncle Abe bargain with Pharaoh over his wife. Uncle Abe was doing stuff he shouldn't have been doing because it didn't necessarily line up with the walk of faith that he was called to do. Not too long ago, I had all my kids with me. I had all 4 of my kids at the house. And I pulled all my hair out that day. And what we like to do is we like to get together and we like to huddle up on the couch, turn all the lights off, get some popcorn, watch movies together, and just kind of snuggle. And, you know, it's a family thing. So I'm flipping through Netflix and I find a movie. I was like, oh, man, that's awesome. This is a movie that I love to watch prior to my salvation. Let me just put that out there. It's still a good movie, in my opinion, because it actually represents modern day life, modern families. It represents, you know, what happens frequently, even in the church. So I'm talking this movie up. I thought it was great back then. This movie's awesome. You know, I had them all pumped. We're not even to the first scene yet. It's not even done, and my son turns to me and he said, "Real Christian movie, Dad." Stop. Pause. Turn it off. Find something else. 2 things happen in that moment. My son is well aware of my walk with God. He's well aware of the way I walk in faith. So the 2 things that happen is he watched me step out of my faith and partake in the world, something that doesn't necessarily line up with the way I walk. And he held me accountable. I'm still working with my son on his faith, but he held me accountable. Choices that we make affect other people. What choices do we need to actually make in our own lives to line up with our walk of faith? I'm going to go back and read 6 through 8 again because that's the substance of this. The land could not support both of them dwelling together, for the possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And at the time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. The substance was so great between them, a quarrel arose not within the people, but with the people who loved to be about that people. It wasn't between some who were traveling. It was between some who were traveling with them. It was not a significant quarrel, but we got to see what started that, and that was that faith faltered. The way we actually stepped out. Abram takes control again. He steps up in the quarrel, and he's a man of peace, so he calms it down. And in verse 8 and 9, in the King James Version says that Abram's praying to God again. He's praying for peace, and he's praying that Lot chooses the choice of direction. So he gave Lot the actual divergence. He gave him the choice to choose. Now, it's always in our best nature to have the best of stuff. Our family deserves it. We want it. We need it. We have to act like Christians and care and take care of all of our people. We got to have the TV. We got to have the smartest dumb phone there is. Big house, big lawn, big gardens, best blessings for others. We always want it because we want to bless people. Give us the big yard, and nobody can come over. Give us the big garden, and I'll ration it out when I need to. Somehow we feel that brings the security. The influence that Egypt had on Lot because of Abram's choice to remedy that situation himself was tremendous. So Lot goes to Egypt with Abe, and he sees that Egypt is far more rich than what Abraham would ever have been. Lot is lifting up his eyes at the moment he has to choose in comparison to what he just seen. Lot seen how Egypt was, but it was so much grander than what Abe was. So he chose according to sight, not according to faith. Now the Apostle Paul tells us that we should no longer conform to the patterns of this world. Now this verse applies to this narrative because of the influence that Egypt had. During Abram's flee of circumstance, Lot chooses the lush life, the comfort, the temporary luxury. One can only think that if Abram never wavered and continued to rely on God in his decision-making, even though the circumstances was forcing him to choose, Lot's choice would have been completely different. If you continue on with that narrative, you know that it didn't work out too well for Lot's wife. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, between your herdsmen and my herdsmen. For we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left, then I will go right. If you take the right, then I will go left." And Lot lifted up his eyes, and he saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It's very important to see that there. This was before. If Lot would have seen Abram walk in faith, he would have never chosen that. Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Then they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. They separated. Lot chose a land that resembled Egypt. It was a land that resembled the world. This was a land that must be highlighted in your Bible. Let's just highlight it in your Bible because the author tells us that Lot made this choice before the cities in it were destroyed. You know, the headlines are big right now on a decision made by a few police officers in Baltimore. News feeds are flooded with this tragedy. And this is not the first time we have seen these things happen, but more and more we are seeing decisions being made that are affecting entire cities, entire nations. The decisions by one or more people are turning the places we call home completely upside down. Decisions affect people, and divergent changes people. Now, if the choice would have been to follow proper procedure, then the people of Baltimore would not have been evoked to this violence and destroy the city that they have. Yet, however, they also have the choice to diverge or not. So their external circumstance put them in that position. Divergence. The choice of change and the choice to change. The King James Version tells us that Abram prayed to God in the 8th and 9th verse. Lot had went on the path he chose, and the Lord spoken to Abram again. At this moment, Abram is presenting the entire land, allowing Lot to choose first. But we see God's purpose was for Abram to be brought back to his promise. Abram chose to lift his heart to the Lord in prayer first. God then summoned Abram to his promise. Abram chose to lift up his heart to the Lord in prayer first before he made any choice. There was a couple heading out on vacation. It was September 11th, the day of the attacks on our nation. Early in the morning on the way to the airport, they had a flat tire. They ended up missing one of those flights. Frustrated. But it turned out their flight was one of the planes that went down. Had they not had a flat tire, they wouldn't be alive today. So grateful for a flat tire. The young man's father lived in the city, and he called very frantically. He was worried. He was so relieved to hear the good news that they missed that flight. Now, this father was a retired firefighter in New York. He told his son he was going to go down to the World Trade Centers to help rescue people. That was the last time the father ever spoke to his son. The father was killed when the buildings came crashing down. Now, when this young couple heard the news, the joy of their life being spared turned to sorrow. You see, this father wouldn't have anything to do with God. He never chose God. He wasn't open at all. The son had tried and tried to share his faith with his father. He tried to talk about Christ. But the son was so heartbroken, not only that his father had died, but he just wasn't sure that his father had peace with God when he died. 3 months later, there was a knock on that door. A young couple holding a little baby. The man said, "Are you so-and-so?" And he said, "Yes, I am." The couple asked, "Would you mind if we come in just for a few minutes? I want to talk with you." Come to find out, the mother explained how she was in the World Trade Center attack that day. She was 7 months pregnant at that time. And this man's father came and rescued her and carried her all the way down the stairs. On the way down, she began to talk to his dad about a relationship with God, receiving Christ. She said, when we got to the bottom floor, your dad got down on his knees. He asked Christ to come into his heart. She said, we not only came to tell you this, we wanted to introduce you to our child. We named him after your father. The choice that this couple had made at that time had an impact on the outcome of the lives around them. Through the birth of their child, the walk and talk of faith in God during the rescue mission, the capacity to let their walk of faith be known in the most troubled times. Circumstances does not define the faith that we have, but the faith we have define the choices that we make. God has a purpose for our lives. Sometimes our decisions may kind of slow down that fulfillment. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, now lift up your eyes, son, and look from the place where you are, northward and southward, eastward and westward, for all the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring can also be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent, and he came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. So Abram took a huge step of faith in Genesis 12, 1 through 9. He made some bad choices, 10 through 20. That didn't necessarily line up with God at that time. Abram faltered, as we all do. Now we are right back to where we started in the first place. Did you guys know that God has his own GPS system? I call it the God positioning system. It's not the little handheld app that you got on your phone. It's not the big box in your car or on the dashboard, wherever you put it. Abram faltered. But God's glorified positioning system, he used to put Abram back into the promise that he had made. Check this out. Now, as hunters, we have the convenience to step out into new territory because of these GPS systems. But there was a more primitive way. They used to put these little reflective thumbtacks on trees so that when your light shined on it, you knew where you were going. But now there's even an older primitive way, and that's the altars of the Lord. It is an altar Abram chose. And it's an altar. Abram chose to waver. Abram made some mistakes. I'm cutting a little bit because of time. Abram left what was promised to him. Abram's choices were not that smart. Abram's gain in Egypt was not justifiable. But watch. God brought him back to the very place he was given in the first place. Abram built altars to the Lord all over that land. All the way down to Egypt and all the way back. He knew that these altars would put him back in the same spot that God called him. Abram used this altar system to bring himself back to the place where he began. First to the altar between Bethel and Ai, then onto the oaks of Mamre. And God spoke to him and summoned him to lift his eyes and walk the land. Lift up the heart and believe. God brings us to his promises. And he's merciful enough to reposition us when we decide to stray. On the day that Christ died, that was the final altar to the Lord. That's the only one we need. He's the final position to choose. He is the walk we share. He is the walk that we shine. He is the faith that we portray. Jesus is that altar in our lives, and he is the divergence of the world. Our walk with him will impact others. Our choices with him will influence others. And our divergence with him will always be on display. You have a choice, you choose, you change. Divergence.